Welcome, everyone. We're delighted to have you here for the third in our fall webinar series, Resilience Through Restoration. Thank you all for joining us, and many thanks to our generous sponsors, Environmental Science Associates, the Foster, Holland and Knight, and Spotswood Estate Vineyard and Winery for supporting this webinar series and sharing Sustainable Conservation's vision of stewarding our most precious natural resources for all Californians. I'm Ashley Boren, CEO of Sustainable Conservation. And for those of you who don't know us, Sustainable Conservation is a nonprofit dedicated to advancing the collaborative stewardship of California's land, air, and water for the benefit of nature and people. That means that every day we bring together business, landowners, scientists, government, water agencies, nonprofits, and others to advance collaborative solutions to steward the natural resources we all depend on in ways that are just and make economic sense. We're focusing this webinar series on restoration resilience through ecosystem restoration. And we started off in September with a conversation between two leading conservationists in California, Kim Delfino of Earth Advocacy and a longtime Sustainable Conservation Board member, and Curtis Knight of CalTrout. Kim and Curtis set the stage for why restoring California's ecosystems is so important. They also talked about the tremendous opportunity California has with its 30 by 30 initiative to protect 30% of California's land and oceans by 2030, and the significant state and federal funding we have right now for restoration work. In our second webinar in October, we celebrated the new statewide programmatic permits that Sustainable Conservation and our agency partners at the State Water Resources Control Board, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and NOAA Restoration Center created. These new pathways are going to help the state achieve its 30 by 30 goals and ensure the significant money available is spent effectively by saving restoration practitioners and agencies time and money so projects can get implemented more quickly and with more of the funding to go to the actual restoration work. These new statewide programmatic permits are a very big deal. As the Nature Conservancy's North Coast Restoration Project Manager, Peter Vanderberg, said, with this new regulatory tool, we can instead focus on maximizing ecological benefits to achieve truly transformative restoration. This will enable us to implement restoration at a scale and pace commensurate with the enormity of the challenges we face. So I really encourage you to go check these webinars out at our event page where we have links to the recordings. Sometimes when you're celebrating important milestones, it's important to look back to see where you have come and what you have learned during the upstream journey. With today's webinar, we thought we would share Sustainable Conservation's journey to these major accomplishments. I believe it's illustrative of how sustainable conservation works and what it takes to make tangible, lasting progress. Deep listening, bringing people together, trusted relationships, innovation, and perseverance. We began this work early in sustainable conservation's history. So in fact, the approaches of listening, bringing people together, and perseverance were really all born from this work we're going to talk about today. I'm not going to walk you through that journey I am going to walk you through that journey that started back in 1996, believe it or not. And then we're going to talk with our accelerating restoration team who made these recent accomplishments possible. But before we go further, let's find out a little bit about who's in the audience today and how much you know about permitting and sustainable conservation's history with accelerating restoration. So starting off with, where are you joining us from today? And who are you affiliated with? So I'm going to give you guys a few moments to fill this out. And I just realized, thank you, Hannah, that I didn't have my video on. So sorry about that, guys. I'm here, not just talking in a black box. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. We got everyone participate. Let's close the poll. Pretty good distribution. Looks like 20% from the Bay Area, 20% Northern California, 20% Sac Valley. Nobody from the Central Coast today, but we've got some folks from the San Joaquin Valley, Sierra Nevada, and SoCal, and some out of state. So welcome, everyone. And then it looks like we've got a lot of folks from the government sector and the nonprofit sector, as well as some folks from philanthropy and business represented. So that's great. We got 3 more questions for you. These are going to kind of test you on your knowledge of permitting for restoration. So the first is, do you know how many permits you need to implement a restoration project? Have you heard of Partners in Restoration? And do you know what a programmatic permit is? Okay, getting close. I think that's good, Hannah. Let's close the poll and see what we've got. So, okay, well, about a little less than half of you know how many permits you need. So you're going to learn about that today. And same, you're going to also learn about Partners in Restoration and also what a programmatic permit it is. So we will get to that. Let's go back and let's get started. So the problem we're going to talk about today is the significant barrier that the permitting process posed to getting restoration projects done. This wheel that you see represents all the regulatory processes that a landowner or any entity really implementing a restoration project has to go through before they can put their restoration project on the ground. California has strong environmental laws and regulations, which is a very good thing. But our regulations do not distinguish between restoration and a housing or hotel development. The permitting process can consume up to 30% of a project's budget and take years to complete. That consumes a lot of time and money, and often many landowners, both private and public, choose not to pursue restoration because the process of getting all these different permits is so onerous and costly. Sustainable Conservation and our agency partners set out to put restoration on a separate path. Our solution was programmatic permits, and you're going to hear a lot about these. So let's take a minute to be sure we all know what a programmatic permit is. A programmatic permit is essentially a pre-approved regulatory process for qualifying projects. There are clearly established project types, in our case, restoration projects. There are clear criteria to ensure the projects are environmentally beneficial. And then there are requirements and conditions to follow as the projects are being implemented. Requirements are things like not doing any work near a river or stream when red-legged frogs are breeding. Because all this information is clearly established up front, the applicant can design their project to meet the criteria and requirements. By having a programmatic permit in place, an applicant can get their project approved much more quickly. Basically, all the hard work has already been done to ensure that the projects are implemented in a way that minimizes any harm to resources and honors all environmental laws. So the origin story of our work to put restoration on a separate permitting path from development began in the Elkhorn Slough watershed in Monterey County, pictured here. It's California's second largest estuary after San Francisco Bay. And estuaries are where freshwater meets saltwater, and they are among the most productive habitats in the biological world, able to support many species. And that is certainly true of the Elkhorn Slough. More than 340 species of birds, 100 species of fish, and 500 species of invertebrates have all been seen here. But the slough is also surrounded by grazing and agricultural lands, and how those lands are managed can have a significant impact on the health of this ecosystem. One of the region's conservation leaders recently reflected on how the lands surrounding the slough had been grazed witless back in the 1990s. In addition, Elkhorn Slough is surrounded by strawberry fields on steep slopes. Between the grazing and the strawberry fields, the Elkhorn Slough has some of the worst erosion rates west of the Rockies, not a recipe for protecting the rich biodiversity and ecosystem of the slough. Sustainable Conservation was founded in 1993 to proactively engage business and private landowners in conservation to help protect areas like the Elkhorn Slough. As we talked to landowners and listened, we quickly discovered that permitting was a major barrier to them implementing erosion control and restoration practices. There was lots of Farm Bill funding through the Natural Resources Conservation Service, which is a division of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, lots of technical assistance to support and incentivize them. But when farmers and ranchers found out they had to go to 7 different government agencies to get permits, they said, forget it. Sustainable conservation set out to fix that problem, and I will tell you, many people told us it was not a problem that could be fixed. But we were a young organization at the time, and perhaps naive, but we also knew the situation of regulations designed to prevent bad things from happening was also preventing good things from happening, and that just did not make sense. We also believed that if we could successfully address it, we could leverage all the Farm Bill funding that was out there, and that would help reduce erosion, restore rivers and streams, and help protect areas like the Elkhorn Slough. So the first incarnation of our work on permitting, Partners in Restoration, was born. Partners in Restoration, or PIR, as we call it internally, was a partnership between Sustainable Conservation, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and the Local Resource Conservation District, or RCD. In the Elkhorn Slough, we identified which restoration practices were needed in the watershed, and then we developed a programmatic permit for those practices with each of the seven agencies you saw on that wheel for the watershed. It took several years, but we were able to get the program established with the Monterey County Resource Conservation District holding the permits. The RCD then did outreach to the farmers and invited them to sign up for the program. By signing up for the program, the landowners agreed to all the conditions and to get technical assistance from the RCD to implement the projects. They no longer needed to go to each individual agency to get a permit for each individual project. This made it much, much easier and very cost-effective for the landowner. In the next 5 years, 46 permitted projects were implemented in the Elkhorn Slough watershed. And among other things, these 46 projects prevented 41,000 tons of erosion with its associated fertilizers and pesticides from draining into the Elkhorn Slough, helping create healthier conditions for the wildlife there. That's enough dirt to fill a line of full-size pickups from Salinas to Santa Rosa. So needless to say, with the success in Elkhorn Slough, there was a lot of interest from other watersheds to have a PIR program. We originally thought we would replicate it in a couple of other watersheds and then the agencies would take it over. That was naive. We ended up replicating the PIR program in 12 other watersheds and counties, mostly in coastal California, between 2000 and 2013. We thought it would get easier to implement as time went on, but found that was not the case and that we had to recreate the wheel each time. So in 2011, we took a step back to survey and interview all the participants and to evaluate the costs and benefits of the Partners in Restoration program. We wanted to learn what we could do better. The benefits were definitely there. On average, having a PIR program increased restoration fivefold, but there were a lot of challenges and a lot of costs. On average, each county program was taking 3 years to set up at a cost of about $500,000. So while the program was cost effective for the landowner once it was set up, it was not cost effective for sustainable conservation or the agencies. And California has 58 counties, so we knew going county by county just didn't make sense. Our report, which summarized the evaluation, had 10 key findings and recommendations. The major and most important one was to go bigger and establish programmatic permits for restoration on a regional and statewide scale instead of the watershed and county scale. We issued the report, and the next day I got a call from Pat Rutten, the then Southwest Regional Director for NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, who said, "Let's work together." We did not realize it at the time, but that phone call was a major turning point for our work to accelerate restoration in California. Over the next 5 years, we partnered with NOAA to expand their programmatic permit, which is called a biological opinion for them, to all of coastal California represented in green on this map. Then we worked together to get the California Coastal Commission to issue their version of a programmatic permit for this situation, a consistency determination, for the entire coast represented by the blue line in this map. State agencies can issue consistency determinations if the federal activity is consistent with state laws, which is what the Coastal Commission did with NOAA's biological opinions. This is a very valuable tool and an important way to avoid unnecessary duplication of effort. We then went to work with NOAA to develop a biological opinion for the Central Valley, where important floodplain restoration work needs to happen. So by the end of 2018, we had successfully simplified the process with two of the agencies in this wheel. The new approach of regional programmatic permits was cost-effective, not only for the landowner or restoration practitioner, but also for the agency. NOAA estimates that they have saved up to $13 million over the life of their biological opinions. So buoyed by our successful partnership with NOAA, we decided together to approach the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Army Corps of Engineers. NOAA encouraged their sister federal agencies to do what they had done, but instead of doing it regionally, to do one statewide permit. California State Water Board was also interested in participating. So in 2018, Sustainable Conservation launched its most ambitious programmatic permitting effort to date to establish not regional, but statewide programmatic permits for restoration with the State Water Board and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, with the Army Corps and NOAA participating, and using the NOAA programmatic permits as a model. Sustainable Conservation led and facilitated the process. The goal was to provide coverage to commonly implemented aquatic restoration projects and to have the guidelines and the conditions for those projects be consistent across all the agencies so that restoration practitioners only had to follow one set of guidelines. This past August, after nearly 5 years of work, we succeeded. The California State Water Resources Control Board unanimously approved a statewide programmatic permit for commonly implemented aquatic restoration projects and an accompanying environmental impact report to comply with the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. A couple of weeks later, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service issued its statewide programmatic permit for the same commonly implemented restoration projects, covering 72 endangered and threatened species. So species like the red-legged frog, the western snowy plover, and the San Francisco garter snake. Because this was done together with the Army Corps, we now have alternative pathways for restoration with Fish and Wildlife Service, the Army Corps, and the State Water Board, in addition to NOAA and the Coastal Commission for the entire state. Importantly, all of these pathways are for projects that have no size limitations. So while we were first working with NOAA and the Coastal Commission, we were also working with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. That was soon after we had issued our report, and we had assumed that any regional or statewide effort would need to start with small-scale restoration projects. We partnered with the Department of Fish and Wildlife on legislation to create the Habitat Restoration and Enhancement Act in 2014, which creates a 30 to 60-day approval pathway for projects under 5 acres and less than 500 linear feet of stream. What we learned from working with NOAA was that programmatic permits could be created for all size restoration projects as long as they meet the criteria and requirements. This is part of what led us to launch the statewide effort with the Water Board, Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Army Corps for restoration projects with no size limitations. The Habitat Restoration and Enhancement Act has been very successful, and the department has been working to extend coverage to larger projects. So here's just a couple of examples of the types of projects that can happen more quickly. Projects like this Beaver Dam analog in Siskiyou County that the Scott River Watershed Council put in place. Beaver dam analogs are low-cost woven lattice structures that mimic natural beaver dams. They regulate both in-stream flows and temperature for fish populations and fill floodplains to enhance wetland habitat, replenish groundwater, and boost soil health. And projects like this dam removal in Stanislaus County by the Tuolumne River Trust. Dam removal can benefit multiple fish species, help ensure natural ecological processes can occur, boost habitat, and allow people to boat safely on rivers. So today we're celebrating the recent statewide programmatic permits that the State Water Board and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service approved. We're very excited about the restoration they're going to help California accelerate. And we're also celebrating the journey, what we learned along the way, and how that has shaped what sustainable conservation is today. It started with listening to farmers and ranchers in the Elkhorn Slough and launching our Partners in Restoration program, which did a lot of good, but could be better. So we listened and learned more to come up with better strategies. We then formed an incredibly valuable partnership with NOAA Restoration Center that made the program more cost-effective to implement and more cost-effective for the agency, and also created a model for other agencies. That partnership grew into the successful statewide partnership with all 3 federal agencies and California State Water Board that resulted in these two first of their kind statewide programmatic permits for restoration that we're celebrating today. These core approaches to problem solving that began in the Elkhorn Slough are carried out through all our work today. Approaches like listening, bringing people together, learning as we go, and perseverance. So leading this work was Sustainable Conservation's very talented, patient, and persevering accelerating restoration team, Erica Lovejoy, Katie Haldeman, and Stephanie Falsoni. So first off, congratulations, team. It was an incredible effort. I'd like to start off with you each introducing yourselves, how long you've been with Sustainable Conservation, and your experience before joining us. So who wants to start? Erica?
Sure. Thanks, Ashley. So I've been at Sustainable Conservation for more than 10 years now. And before I came here, I actually worked for several different regulatory agencies, and including the State Water Resources Control Board, the regional boards, California Coastal Commission, and then I worked at Department of Water Resources and for the City and County of San Francisco, analyzing the impacts of major water projects, and even managed a local watershed program in South San Francisco Bay. So I spent a lot of time working for and with government prior to this post. And I think that having both that government agency experience and then working for a nonprofit, where it was kind of easier for me to sit and listen to the perspectives of other folks engaged in restoration, was really helpful for me in understanding perspectives from both sides.
Great. How about you, Katie?
Thanks, Ashley. Hi, everyone. Katie Haldeman here. I've been with the organization about 9 years now. And before that, I actually used to work for different resource conservation districts and I was helping landowners, improve the environment and their property at the same time. And then I also worked for the County of Santa Barbara on the Gaviota Coast Plan, which we engaged a planning advisory committee, which is members of the community to help the government make important decisions about the future of the coast in Santa Barbara. So, that experience kind of led me to better understand how you do need to balance the needs of landowners and the local community with agency responsibilities. And then it takes a long time to make meaningful change. I think that Gaviota Coast Plan took about 10 years to develop. So anyway, glad to be here.
You came in with the requisite patient skills.
Yes, exactly. Long range planning.
Yeah. How about you, Steph?
I've been with Sustainable Conservation for 6 years. I started on the Plant Right team before that program graduated to its new home in 2018, and we were trying to figure out where I should go next. And this has been a good fit. So that's when I moved to this team, but I'm still the plant lady of our program. Some of my past jobs and internships have been as an outdoor educator in Yellow Springs, Ohio, and also my on-the-ground experience with habitat restoration was as a restoration technician with Point Blue Conservation's STRAW project. And that stands for Students and Teachers Restoring a Watershed. So with that, I was working at sites all over the North Bay, including Pickleweed Park in San Rafael, Sonoma Baylands, and what is now Tole Lake Regional Park, doing a lot of riparian, planting trees along the creeks. And then I also really love working along the Baylands.
So I very much agree with Jake Shannon. You can see why this is the A team for getting this work done. Okay, so when you all think back on this, very successful accomplishments over the past 5 years in particular, what are you most excited about? And Steph, let's start with you.
I am really excited to see these new permits get used and see how it gets, helps get their projects on the ground faster. And one of the most fun parts of my job is getting to track the use of these accelerated permitting pathways and read about the projects. It's always a great learning experience and always really exciting to see the real impacts it can have, and then get to celebrate those partners in blog posts or webinars or newsletters and however we can.
That's great. Katie, how about you?
Yeah, I'm excited about having improved partnerships between regulatory agency staff and the restoration community to help accelerate restoration, but also while maintaining environmental protections. And I'm really looking forward to seeing all of our proactive permitting work pay off down the road.
Yeah, me too. Erica, how about you?
Well, of course, I'm excited about just getting these last 2 big permits done. That was big relief, and I took a big vacation. But honestly, I'm excited about what the agencies have done, and I'm excited about the opportunity for them to be recognized for it, because a lot of times agencies don't get credit for sticking their necks out and taking chances and doing something differently, and I feel it feels really good to be able to recognize them.
Yeah, and I think you probably can particularly appreciate that, having worked within these agencies in the past. So it's great. So I talked a lot about, the agencies we worked with. Stephanie, I didn't really talk about how we engaged the restoration community. So could you just share some of what we did?
Sure. So this was an essential part of the success of these new permits and what it made it, I think, a unique process. And so in the early stages, the team surveyed project proponents, restoration project funders, and agency staff that helped shape what was covered by these permits. And some of the things we asked about were what kind of project types they want to implement, what species are you encountering, to narrow down the hundreds of species in California to what was included. And also their project permitting demand and needs over the next 5 to 10 years. We wanted to make sure this was something, investing a lot of time and money into it, that it was, worth it and would accomplish what people needed. And then during the process, once we had, I think it had already gone through a couple drafts of all the protection measures, we did some direct outreach to some specific experts, but all around the state, to ground truth those measures and also make sure they make sense and are implementable. And we brought that input back to the agencies to make sure it met their standards. And there was also the public comment process that was part of the State Water Board process with CEQA, and that helped also solidify the project types and the protection measures as well. And the 2 documents fed, comments on them, fed back and forth. So that made it more interesting to manage that process, but well worth it in the end.
I really think that outreach to the restoration practitioners was such an important part of what we did, because these have to be useful and very usable for the folks that are actually doing the work to really accelerate restoration. So that was really well worth the time and effort that we put into it. So I mentioned this, but a lot of people thought this work couldn't be done all the way along the journey, but in particular, when we went to the statewide approach, there was a lot of folks that really thought it might be impossible. So, how did we get the agencies to collaborate with us on this ambitious effort? And Erica, I'll direct that one to you.
Sure. Well, we definitely had a lot of skeptics initially, and her like, oh, this can't be done, no way on. And so, we heard a lot of that, and it's somehow, maybe due to the nature of our team, perhaps it was a motivating force for us to keep on going. I was like, oh, really? Well, we're going to see. So for sure, what we were proposing was a different way of doing business for some of the agencies, or at a much bigger scale. And even though we had some champions, it definitely took some convincing. So to get the buy-in, we went to the leadership of the agencies at multiple levels and different agencies, and we had to show them that how a programmatic approach like this could succeed. And fortunately, we did have some good examples with the NOAA Restoration Center and the Partners in Restoration programs. And but admittedly, getting that buy-in took a while, but once we got the first yes, and we got the first letter of commitment from Maria Ray for the Central Valley National Marine Fisheries Service programmatic biological opinion, which would complete NOAA's statewide coverage, then that really helped the other agencies to join us. And folks like Pat Retton, Maria Ray, they were really lifesavers and helped the others to jump on board. And we did, but none of it was easy. We did lots of presentations, more than I can possibly count, but we kept on going until we got all the yeses, because we knew it was important and could have a big impact. So we just kept our eye on the prize.
and you persevered.
Yep.
I've said this to this team a couple of times, but they have permanent sainthood in my book. So Erica kind of referred to this, but we know there were challenges along the way. So Katie, maybe tell us what some of those challenges were and how we dealt with them.
Great. Thanks, Ashley. Thanks for the question. Well, as you probably picked up through other folks answering questions, one of the biggest challenges was that the level of complexity and the amount of coordination greatly increased compared to our previous programmatic permitting efforts. So, for example, as Erica mentioned, we had worked with the National Marine Fisheries Service, in some cases, on a regional basis rather than statewide. And National Marine Fisheries Service protects a handful of different in-water fish species. So then we took that successful model, but we applied it statewide to a new agency, and the complexity increased greatly. Working with hundreds of threatened and endangered plants, reptiles, amphibians, mammals, fish, and birds in California. And then there's also the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, which is a sister agency. So a lot of moving pieces. You got creatures to protect in the land and air and water. So it was challenging to get commitment for one statewide authorization because it hadn't really been done before, especially in this state. And, as Erica explained, folks said it might not be possible. But, using No Restoration Center's experience, they said all the extra upfront work to do one statewide consultation would more than pay off in the long run. So, for example, it took them about 12 years to get statewide coverage with National Marine Fisheries Service by going region by region. But this effort with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and as well as State Water Board, it took 5 years, and it covers many more species in the whole state. So that effort was worthwhile. Same thing with PIR programs were taking about 3 years on average per watershed. And again, we accomplished a lot in the last 5 years or so. And then, these new permits, they could be used by, or authorizations, they could be used by governments, NGOs, landowners. They're not just necessarily tied to a specific RCD, which is helpful.
Yeah.
So it was challenging to do the statewide approach, but also very important because going statewide means you can be inclusive of the scope and scale of aquatic restoration projects that are happening throughout the state. You're not just limited to scope and scale in one region of the state. And then you can project what's going to happen over the next decade. And now this tool can be used by agency staff and by folks all over the state. There's one part of the state doesn't have to wait until we can help them. We can help everybody at once. So that was helpful, and also helpful to bring everybody along in one big group. And then finally, another challenge is, figuring out, as Stephanie said, what species to include. Once we settle on a statewide approach, we got to whittle down the total number of species. As Ashley said, there's 72 included in the authorization. So figuring out the existing and projected future demand took quite a bit of work and research. And then figuring out how to efficiently organize all these protection measures, because got 72 species, you don't want to have redundancy. We do want to make this an efficient consultation, so we're able to work and group protection measures based on guild or kind of family of species, reptiles, amphibians, etc. And then, I won't get into too much more, but essentially, in summary, the level of complexity and coordination just increased greatly, but the benefits of taking the statewide approach were definitely worth it.
Yeah, just to kind of maybe illustrate the complexity, Katie, remind me, how long is the Fish and Wildlife Service statewide biological opinion, the document?
Well, with all the appendices and things, it's pushing 800 pages or so, and a lot of that is actually analysis on and making this document robust.
This
so
kind of represents that complexity. So.
Yeah.
So, okay, now we got these permits available. Steph, how are we going to ensure they get used?
So yeah, we know it's not enough to just develop these tools and walk away and go on vacation forever. We did have to come back in. Right now we're in the rollout phase, and us being involved in that's really important. And with rollout, it's both sides of that regulatory equation have to be prepared to use these tools. So project proponents have to know that they exist, first of all, and then which kinds of projects they can be used for, how to use them, who to contact. And then agency staff all over the state have to be prepared to use these tools when the project proponents come to them. So that they can apply them consistently and efficiently, and it can go smoothly for everyone. And any new process is going to take some time to get used to and familiar with. We even just met with all the federal agencies yesterday to talk about, getting messaging out and working on some frequently asked questions and what questions are we all getting, and keeping the conversation going about that. So the other thing we're going to be doing is we'll be hitting the road. We'll be at some conferences late this year and spring of next year, doing webinars. We're fielding questions that we get by email and writing those technical assistance calls. And we're also working on a dedicated accelerating restoration website that'll have information about how to use these new tools, as well as the whole suite of tools that already existed, and help people figure out how to piece them all together for their particular project. We're also working on some handouts, lots of materials, fact sheet, updating our permitting table right now. And so yeah, the state and federal agencies are involved in this process, and will be providing feedback, and we'll be coordinating that with them a lot throughout this process.
That's great. That's great. Okay, last question, and then I'll go to questions from our audience. So Erica, can you walk us through the steps kind of in the process, and in summary, just kind of the key things that you need to do when you're pursuing a statewide programmatic permit approach?
Sure. There's definitely some things that we've learned along the way as we've done this work over the years and built up from regional to statewide. And one of the first things, and that's been talked about it a bit, is doing your homework on the restoration needs and priorities in your area. So you can justify that for the agencies and for the funders to show that it's going to be worth their while to invest in an effort like this. So looking at whether you have similar types of projects that need to be done at a larger scale across the state, and whether common environmental protection measures could apply, because that's a kind of a key part of programmatic permits. And Stephanie, I think, talked about the surveys and interviews of project proponents and agencies that we did on the need for their permits, the funding priorities, how the existing permitting processes work for them, so we can help work on refinements. And that definitely helped us to craft these authorizations for success. And then we've already talked about finding a good model, and the really great model we had with NOAA Restoration Center in particular, who has just really set the bar pretty high and showed how well programmatic authorizations can work and benefit the agencies and project proponents. And with that, finding champions at the agencies who are willing to do things in a different way, because like I said, a lot of times agency folks don't get a lot of incentives or credits for sticking their neck out. It's really, their jobs are very hard. And so, getting a champion at the agencies and buy-in from the highest levels of the agency leadership, so those leaders can help engage their staff, engage and empower their staff really to use a new process and do things differently. And then also to, have that expertise of the agency staff available to do more technical assistance and less administrative work. The agency staff are a critical part of the success of these authorizations. And then we've talked a lot about making sure these permits work for the project proponents and the people doing the on the ground work. and also that whatever's being drafted is indeed a more efficient process than the status quo. That's really important. So we always had to kind of take a look back. Is this indeed actually more efficient? So in order to work that out, really getting project proponents involved in the process and looking at the protection measures, in addition to getting agreement from all the agencies, is really important. And of course, there's a number of other things that we learned along the way, but overall, I would say that just bringing the restoration community together with the agencies to help create the permits is really one of the best possible solutions, and leads to a lot more partnership to be able to get the work done.
Yeah, which is definitely among our theme of bringing people together to solve these issues. So thanks you guys again, and congratulations to all three of you again. I'm going to go and I'm scrolling through some of the questions we've got from our audience. So I'm going to start with, are your measures consistent throughout the state, or do you have agency staff tell you that their district needed something different because the ecosystem is different there? Who wants to take that one?
You want me to take it?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question. It depends on the species. Some species are limited to a very sort of relatively small location in the state, while others are more spread out. So in some cases, we bring together, both agency staff from, let's say, North and South California, to see if they can reconcile protection measures. In some cases, we try to have limits or protections that would scale with the project, so they weren't they could be applicable in different conditions, rather than having sort of just firm numbers. You could have a percentage impact rather than a fixed number impact. So we were able to essentially reconcile those issues and not have to have different conditions based on where you are in the state, because we do want to have statewide consistency in expectations. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
It also gives a little window again on how complex it is and complicated to do it right. Another question is, do you have to reinitiate consultation after 10 years with each agency?
I could take that one again. After 10 years, the consultation with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, it can be renewed by the agencies. So essentially, yes, you could say that's a reinitiation, but at that point, they'll have a lot more data as well as information on how the program is running, and it will be a much simpler process to renew after 10 years. And again, one of the things that I was so excited about with the statewide approach is you have one renewal every 10 years, and you can tweak the program at a statewide level, and you can capture the state's progress toward meeting restoration goals or mandates at a statewide level, rather than piecing together different regional authorizations. So that was part of the architecture and making it efficient for very long term.
That's great. Here's another one, kind of around actual projects and getting them done. Everyone seems to agree that removal or remediation of fish barriers should be a priority, but even the smallest of projects seems to require expensive engineering surveys and wetland delineation studies. Has there been any progress on these fronts?
I could speak a little bit to that. In terms of the wetland delineation, I know we've heard before what nationwide permit with the Army Corps, number 27 for aquatic habitat restoration, that there's some wetland delineation requirements depending on who the applicant is. And I know we've worked with the restoration community in the past to try to change those requirements or make them so they're not quite as onerous on the applicant, and have them scale to the complexity of the project. But ultimately it may come down to the details of the project, and whether or not there's liability downstream with landowners, or public safety issues. but we've always pushed for having requirements scale to the scope and scale of the project, and have the requirements, both whether they be monitoring or reporting or information requirements, be commensurate with the level of complexity of the project.
Anybody want to add to that, or you're ready for your next question?
Yeah, no, I agree with what Katie's saying. We've tried to do that, and we realize that there's a lot of technical expertise at the different agencies, and we definitely respect that. We hope that by providing these types of programmatic permitting tools that really have quite a few robust conditions, that they'll help simplify the process for both agency staff and project proponents, and hopefully allow more time for just that technical assistance element and time between the staff and project proponents, where they can talk about some of these project details and really ascertain what type of other studies might be needed. So, we hope that creates a process for that to occur a little bit more.
Here's a good question. How does this work relate to the state's Cutting the Green Tape initiative?
I'll take that one. This work is directly in line and called for in the state's Cutting the Green Tape initiative. We've been very involved in that process, and in fact, the Cutting the Green Tape process has been a huge catalyst. It has really helped move our work forward, as well as the other folks who have been working with the agencies on restoration permitting efficiencies. Wade Crowfoot has been a tremendous leader and in moving this work forward, and so it's directly in line with that. And also, we hope it will help the 30 by 30 conservation initiative as well, and many of the governor's initiatives to get more restoration work done in the state and promote nature-based solutions in California.
This is kind of related. Are there plans in place to roll out statewide permits for all government agencies in California, or is the recent success with NOAA, Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Water Board a sort of trial run for this type of permit?
Should I take a stab and then my colleagues? These new permits are not a trial run. They're the real deal. And I think the agencies are really dedicated. The agencies who have taken them on are really dedicated to see them work. And I know they have plans to revisit over time to make refinements. So that's an important part of the process. And for other agencies where it makes sense for them to do this, we think they should. There may be some circumstances where perhaps a legislative approach might work better. I'll say that with the Habitat Restoration and Enhancement Act with California Department of Fish and Wildlife, it was a lovely match to pair it up with the State Water Board's existing small habitat restoration permit. And that is a really efficient process. Both those agencies have been dedicated to make happen, but where it can be done elsewhere or other equivalent approaches that are also efficient, of course, we strongly encourage it, and we're here to help.
Do you have any short summary documents that describe how much money has been saved by various entities and how many more projects acres have been put on the ground?
Well, I know, going back to the Partners in Restoration days, that there was the report produced that showed the benefits of having programmatic permits in place for on a county by county basis. So there's that data. And then the NOAA Restoration Center has also published some data on cost savings and time savings that they've realized. And then as as these new programmatics roll out, I'm sure we'll have more case studies to highlight and more data.
Can you share links to those resources? I think we can, yeah. Let's see, I don't see any more questions. So let me do a final question to you all. And that would be, what's next for you guys? After you've had good vacations, you can have some more vacation, but what's next?
I'll take a stab at this, and then hopefully Stephanie and Katie can chime in. So all this permitting work, it has been super important, and we want folks to take advantage of these authorizations for sure. But while the permits are important, there's a lot of other work that needs to be done to really accelerate restoration in California at the pace and scale we need. And some of the things that we're thinking about in the future are, working on more incentives to get restoration done, financial incentives, perhaps other policy incentives, we think are really important, and also aligning the funding, technical assistance and permitting, so they all work together to more efficiently move projects forward, and ideally where they're put in one house. Like, for example, some of the most effective programs that we've seen and heard the best feedback on are those where they have the permitting, technical assistance, and funding in one place, like California Department of Fish and Wildlife's FRGP program, the NOAA Restoration Centers program. And then these are purpose created programs. The job of the staff is to move these restoration projects forward. And it would be great to see something like that at a larger scale in California, if it could be done efficiently. And we want to put more thought into that. Katie or Stephanie, anything else to add?
I mean, the next year is going to be in part focused on making sure that these permits are implemented, consistently and efficiently throughout the state, and that we're starting to track their project and helping the agencies with the rollout and supporting them however we can, in addition to what Erica said going forward.
Yeah.
I'll just add that whatever we do, we're going to spend a lot of time and research, thinking about it before we, go forward with anything. And we always work in collaboration with, with the restoration community and the regulatory agencies. So that, that is something we always have as part of our program.
Definitely. Actually, another question I skipped over because it was answered in the chat, but I'll bring it up because it's worthwhile to answer it and give a big thank you, which is who funded sustainable conservation for work on these programmatic permits? Private philanthropy, state, federal grants, all of the above?
Who wants to take it? Yeah, okay. We got funding from a variety of sources, from state government grants, from foundations, from private donors. And from a lot of different types of organizations. It was really diverse. And I think what it spoke to was how broadly recognized the need for this type of work is. And there are folks who are trying to get projects done from a variety of different arenas, because it's, I think, in everybody's best interest, wherever you are, to help restore our natural resources. And this was, the permitting picture is just one of the barriers, and we could not have done this work without that support. So quite varied. And thank you for the support from all of you.
Yeah, it was really a fantastic, I don't think we've ever had an effort funded by such a diversity of funders. Several different state agencies contributed to it, foundations, individuals, water agencies, farmers. I mean, really all these people and entities really want to see restoration happen. So was really encouraging, and huge thank you. Okay, we got 2 more questions that came in. Let's see if we have time. First, do the programmatic permits cover standard methodologies like the NRCS field operation technical guides?
Well, I'll speak to this a little bit. I know with the Partners in Restoration programs, one of the reasons why the permitting was efficient is because in part it was tied back to that NRCS engineering or technical guide. And so that gave the agencies some assurances about the design standards for the projects. And, we've since adapted that general model, but expanded on it. And now, I mean, this program is pretty closely tied to the California submounted stream restoration design guidelines, which have been developed over many years, and other standard design guidelines and practices that have been in place. So yeah, where possible, we've tried to link things to those existing resources.
Great. Okay, and this is gonna be the last one, and then we'll close it up. Is there NOAA RC? Okay, this is lots of acronyms. Is there NOAA Restoration Center programmatic biological opinion coverage for the San Francisco Bay Estuary in the works? And that comes from our great friend Jill Sanahara.
I have heard that there is something in the works that would be aligned with what we've been working on, or these new permits. I think, as we all know, there's quite a bit more money coming into the Bay, as well as existing funds from Measure AA and other sources. So the demand is there, and now there's some additional models with these new authorizations. So no idea on timing yet for that, but I know there is support for it, and last I heard, it's under development.
Yeah, and we have not been directly involved in that one, although, we of course encourage, kudos to the folks who are doing it. Thank you. But we also encourage that group, engage restoration project proponents to make sure it works. We hope that the authorizations that have been developed in partnership with so many agencies that we worked with are also the information and conditions from those that apply are utilized. And the best that agencies can do to keep a consistent process where it's appropriate would be ideal.
Great. Well, round of applause for you guys. And thank you very much again for all your incredible work over the past 5 years. We're going to close up, and I just want to say thank you to everyone who joined us today. We really appreciate it. If you'd like to follow Sustainable Conservation's work, please find us on social media, subscribe to our email list, or consider a donation. These webinars and our program work are fueled by the generous contributions of our sponsors, corporate and foundation partners, and individuals like you. And right now, all new and increased donations are currently being matched dollar for dollar. So please consider donating by visiting suscon.org/give or scanning the QR code on your screen. So thanks again, everyone, for participating today. You're going to receive an email with a recording of today's discussion, as well as a survey link. We love your feedback and definitely hope to see you at future webinars. So thank you.